Hello, philosophy and film folks. Happy Tuesday. I hope that this video finds you well. I hope that you all are safe, happy, and healthy wherever it is that you may be. This week we transition to our next topic. We leave love behind and we move into the conversation, into the discussions about fear. One could probably make a handful of jokes that love and fear are still kind of intimately connected. And maybe we'll explore those kind of intersectionalities throughout the videos or in class if you so choose to come. And again, to reiterate something from the previous video that I had sent out to the entirety of all of my classes, if you haven't been coming to class, that's totally fine. But also, if you want to start coming back to class, that is welcomed. So there's no pressure to do so. But if you're finding that you're missing some of the engagement, we're not really having that much of attendance, so I'm not really sticking to the A groups and the B groups. So if you want to come to class, you're more than welcome to do so. If not, I hope that these videos that I make and then the subsequent videos that you have for assignment prove to be useful and prove to be engaging and exciting. Okay. All right, so this week we turn our focus to fear, right? And there's a double move, right? Where one, for our class, let me just kind of see if I can get a little more light here. For our class, it makes sense to turn to the genre of horror, right? Of horror films, of horror movies, and think about why they are so popular, right? And then to take it another kind of couple steps further, not just thinking of like why are horror films so popular, but thinking about the nature of fear itself, right? And that's the philosophical lens here. That's the philosophical aim, is to examine and to engage with the fact that fear is arguably one of, if not the most heavy motivator in many of our lives for decisions that we make or decisions that we don't make, right? When we think about kind of the future that we have in mind for ourselves, how much of it is wrapped up in the fact that we are afraid to try something else, or we're afraid of failing, or we're afraid of not succeeding, okay? So again, thinking about the overall nature of fear, thinking about the overall kind of like why we are scared of what we're scared of, okay? And that's a challenging question, right? That if I were to ask you, what are you scared of and why are you scared of it? You know, or kind of the very vulnerable question, what is your greatest fear, right, and why? Okay. So a couple of questions that I want to have on the radar for this week that we'll talk about in class that I hope you kind of engage with and think about in your own time if you're not coming to class but you're watching these on YouTube, is a couple of things. One, first and foremost, what is fear? Okay? What is it? How does it impact our lives? How are we motivated by it? How are we motivated away from it? Okay? So kind of like all those questions. And then think about and ask the question, well, what are we scared of and why? Like what fears, like actual fears, do we hold and why? Because that's one of the interesting questions, right? The idea that when we think about like what we're scared of, and when we think about like what we when we think about what we're scared of and we think about, these things that we might be able to list off pretty easily, or we might have to take some time to actually really think about it, there's something going on where there's justification often for why we're scared of what we're scared of, right? And so that justification, and kind of like, is it strong justification? Is it weak justification? And then this goes into conversations and discussions about rational fears and irrational fears. Okay? Is there such a thing? Is there such a thing as an irrational fear? Okay? Now let that sink in for a second. Is there a thing such as an irrational fear? Okay? And the reason why I find this question so challenging is chances are that if I told you I was scared of something absolutely ridiculous, okay, maybe I was scared of balloons. Okay, like I had an aversion, I had a really strong dislike. My anxiety raises whenever I'm around balloons, right? And you might think, well, Bryce, that is just freaking crazy. Why are you freaking scared of balloons? Okay? Well, there's got to be a reason, right? It's not that just I woke up one day and I was kind of just like, you know what? I'm going to decide to be scared of something. What is it that I'm going to be scared of? How about balloons? No, right? Probably somewhere in my subconscious, in my experience in the world, I've had encounters with a balloon or with balloons plural that have led me to believe and engage with the world the way that I do as being fearful of balloons, right? And so that's part of our aim here, is to think about, is there such a thing as irrational fears? And I mean, I don't know, I'm sitting on the 3rd floor of the admin building, okay? Chances are I'm putting in, I've got trust, I've got reasonable belief that the building isn't going to collapse right now. I've got reasonable beliefs that even though I'm kind of high off the ground, given the way that I navigate the world, I'm probably not going to just jump out the window, right? Or I'm not going to fall, out the window. And so there's something to be said here that there's a lot of things that we can be fearful of, that we can be, frightened about, but we also aren't, right? So what's going on there? What's going on in these kind of ways of thinking about fear? Okay? And is there such a thing as an irrational fear? Because no matter what, not no matter what, because this is part of the conversation, even something that might seem so ridiculous, like a fear of balloons, or something that might seem so ridiculous to be frightened about, right? To what degree is that rational or irrational? I mean, let's just make it a little bit more time appropriate, okay? How has fear, or being scared, or being timid, because again, all of those might be synonymous, and we'll work through definitions here in just a minute. But how is being fearful, scared, timid, etc. played a role in how we live our lives in the current pandemic with COVID-19, right? Are some more scared about contracting the disease? Are some scared about spreading the disease to others that are more vulnerable? Are some not scared at all and just think that this is absolutely ridiculous, right? And we think about the way that perhaps fear or kind of like timidity, because again, there might be some kind of continuum work there. Timidity as it relates to navigating in our reality, right? And we all, for the most part, either willingly or unwillingly or reluctantly rather, are wearing masks, or wearing, for either, again, kind of like protection of self and protection of others. So like in what way does fear perhaps play a role in some of those decisions, right? And I know that some of you are just over it. I know that some of you are just kind of like frustrated and like this is too far, like let us just kind of live our lives, yada, 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 right? People are just being too timid. People are being too scared. They're just listening blindly, yada, 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 right? We need not to be so scared all the time, right? Well, I don't know here, right? So this is what we're talking about. Okay, we're talking about the way that fear plays a role in our lives, and what either again we because I know that some of you probably watching this are seek that out which frightens you. You seek out that which challenges you and makes you feel a little bit more alive in the frightened kind of sense. Okay, but I also know some of you steer away from that which scares you. That try to live a little bit more on that which is safe, that which is known, that which is, comfy. I don't know, right? So these are all kind of questions that I want to have as we engage this week. Okay? And as we start to engage and as we start to kind of like move into conversations, I want all of these to be part of, again, this overarching kind of conceptual framework of why I think that this topic is, one, so engaging, and two, how it does apply to not just, kind of the philosophical questions that we're asking, but also how it relates to film, how it relates to an entire genre that for many people is their favorite genre. Okay? All right, so we'll kind of pick up with that in the next video.